Let's get in Kunal Shah, who's the head of commodities research at Nirmal Bank, to join us this afternoon. Kunal, hi, thank you so much for taking time out and joining us this afternoon. I wanted to get a sense of what you think about the numbers as well, because 50% tariffs, it's a very big number. What's the near-term impact that you're penciling in at this point?
Yeah, so it's really very interesting. It's not as simple as so generally the first thought which comes in mind that 50% tariffs, so copper is going to be expensive and hence we should buy. That's not the right way to look at it. So if you see what's been happening, the copper yesterday on LME moved up by hardly not even 1%. LME was off yesterday. COMEX copper moved up by 12% yesterday after this announcement, and LME copper today edged down to 2%. LME copper was down by 2% after this news. COMEX copper was up by 10% and LME copper is down. Now, what is happening is US has been importing a lot of copper from last 4 months. Earlier, they used to import around 80,000 tons of copper, which their numbers have shot up to almost 2 lakh tons. I'm talking about the monthly imports. So this kind of move was preempted, and US have been stocking copper from aggressively from last 3 to 4 months. And now you see this announcement coming by Mr. Trump that 50% tariff. So now what is going to happen? All the copper producing countries or the copper producing companies are going to dump this copper to Asia. So China, India, Philippines, Vietnam, Indonesia, these are the countries, where they are going to dump. Africa. So the excess copper is going to flow into Asia. And that's the reason, the Asia is not reacting positively to this news. Copper stocks in Asia are down because the glut will be formed in Asia. Whatever US, because of this 50% tariff, the US is going to, in US, we are going to see a drop in imports going forward. So we are not going to see US aggressively importing copper going forward because they've already stocked it. They've already created good inventory. Now it's the turn of Asia. Okay. And Asia is going to witness in the shorter term the glut happening in the market. So the long-term fundamental of copper because of EV, green energy transition is very positive. But in short term, there are headwinds because of the tariff. It's creating glut elsewhere, and hence it is creating a downside in copper prices on LME and in India also.
Well, absolutely. Thank you so much for bringing that up, because, that sort of trajectory that you've seen for LME as well as copper futures, the difference is quite stark. And that is something that's quite interesting that stood out to me as well. But I also wanted to get your sense on what you think about the supply picture going forward. We'll come to the longer term picture. Of course, you've talked about it, but we'll come to the longer term picture in a bit. First, I wanted to talk about the backwardation that seems to be there, the tight supply that we're looking at. What is your outlook when it comes to the supply picture at this point in time?
See, if you look at the overall supply scenario, the copper concentrate market, okay, is having shortfall because the quality of ores from the Latin American countries have been depleting. The top copper mines of the world, Codelco and everything, they are witnessing the quality of ore is not up to the mark, and hence the concentrate supply is pretty tight. But what has happened on the other side, which is the finished product, the refined copper, China has come up with huge amount of smelting capacity over last 3 4 years, and the kind of smelters which exist in China right now, the smelting margins are almost close to zero. So there is a glut in the refined copper market in China because of excess smelting capacity. So once there is a curtailment in the smelting capacity to take place, you will see the balancing out of copper will take place because the concentrate is tight and the refined copper market is having a glut. So in next few months, a lot of copper smelters in China will be forced to close their operations, and that will lead to a good and healthy bull run in copper. So in a shorter term, we see some headwinds because of the excess smelting capacity, because of the US tariff, and in the longer run, because of the tighter supply in the concentrate market, we will see a bullish trend.
All right, then I also wanted to, since you've mentioned China, I also wanted to zoom in a little bit when it comes to the picture for China, right? Because there's China's economic recovery as well. Start of the year, that was something that we were penciling in to be quite the important factor when it comes to copper. So what do you make of that as well? Is there still some sort of bullishness when it comes to this entire economic recovery picture? And how do you see that also playing into copper prices?
Okay, it's a very good question. So I don't see the demand growth for the industrial metals will not be even 1% in China, because we are seeing the crisis in the Chinese real estate sector. The partly we've seen the solar revolution taking place in China, and green energy that has led to good growth in demand of copper. But right now, 1% demand growth also in copper will be difficult. But on the contrary, the demand growth in other parts of the world, in Asia, in India, in Indonesia, Vietnam, Philippines, all these places, Africa, the demand growth over there is going to move up. So, for example, in India, we see the projection, the copper consumption is going to rise from 2 million tons to 3.5 million tons in next 4 5 years. So, uh, here we are seeing almost double digit growth rate in terms of copper demand, but the demand growth in China will moderate. So look for the other buyers rather than just depending on the China. We've been dependent on China for quite a bit of time, but now we are going to see very muted and tepid demand growth from China, and elsewhere the demand. It's a multipolar world, like Mr. Jaishankar said, and India is the biggest beneficiary of that.
Well, absolutely, Mr. Shah. Multipolar world, and India is set to be the biggest beneficiary. But tell you what, in the multipolar world, it's President Trump who's in fact deciding what happens to copper futures, like we've seen this morning. But I wanted to understand what your picture is when it comes to his environmental policies as well, because even they're quite important when it comes to deciding the trajectory of copper prices. So, what do you make of the environmental policy side of it?
If you see in mining side, what I have been studying, no major growth in the supply side is coming from on the concentrate side in any of the metals, because of the environmental concerns, which is one of the major issues, and all the big miners are finding very difficult, to meet the country's policy, and to meet the environmental concern criteria. So it's a very tricky scenario. On one hand, the green energy demand wants more and more of industrial metals, including copper. But on the other hand, the miners are not able to come up with this kind of massive supply growth. So it's a very tricky part. And anywhere where there is an excess capacity, like I explained to you, China is having excess capacity in the smelting side. So because of this multipolar world, the place where there are excess capacity, they will get shut, and the place where there is a shortage, they will build their new capacities, and this all process is going to be very time consuming. So the entire market, the commodity market, is witnessing a very, I have never seen, I'm in this market from last 20 years, and I've never seen this kind of movement where the COMEX copper price moves up by 10% and LME copper prices goes down by 2%, and India copper prices are flat. So this kind of movement doesn't take place. So these are rare phenomenon, but we have to live in this kind of world.
Really rare phenomenon indeed, and driven by the headlines that we've seen this morning for us. But tell you what, I'm going to be a bit greedy and try and get a sense of what you think about other metals as well. But before I do that, tell us about your forecast when it comes to copper, if you have anything in mind in terms of prices there, and even for gold and silver, what are the kind of price levels that you're looking at? What do you expect there?
So I'm bullish on copper from the longer term perspective. All these headwinds are going to be very short term and short lived. There are two macro trends from here. One is the sharp depreciation in the value of US dollar. That is one narrative. And second, because of the concentrate supply, the prices will shoot up. So these are the two reasons why I remain optimist from the longer term perspective on copper and other metals. So in other metals, I'm bullish on two metals. One is copper and other is silver. These are the two metals where I have seen that shortages have been developing. So if you look at the demand and supply scenario, silver and copper are the two industrial plus Silver is also considered as a precious metal, but these are the two metals where the supply side is witnessing major issues, and that is not being able to meet up with the demand side. So the quality of ores in top mines of the world of copper is depleting, and in silver, secondary mines, which is zinc and lead, most of the silver comes from the zinc and
Right,
lead
right.
mine.
Mr. Shah,
They are
I
not
just quickly wanted to help us with a number here when it comes to copper prices, silver as well as gold. Before we let you go, I just wanted to get a number.
Okay, so copper, my targets by the end of the year, it will be again somewhere at $10,500 on LME. Silver, I'm very bullish, $38 to $40 by the end of this year. And in India, that should translate to 1,20,000 to 25,000. And gold, I'm not very bullish. $3,500 seems to be the top. Gold has discounted all the bullish news in well in advance. When the rate cut comes aggressively in US, gold will move up.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for taking the time out and joining us this afternoon, Mr. Shah. Thank you so much for that outlook
My
as well.
pleasure.